I'm coming at you from the office today. It has become difficult to make videos these last few months, actually a year, or better part of a year. And that's the case because the truth of OMAD, of intermittent fasting, is it's right in front of you. It requires very little upkeep. It requires very little knowledge. And I have decided, however, to keep this channel open, to keep it going, because it is still of value to those of you who are just joining us and finding us and realizing that your life can take on a higher meaning and have more depth. You can improve yourself on a huge level by fasting. And it is for that reason that I have decided not to cancel this channel. I was thinking about just bringing it to a close, but I'm not going to do that, not for a while. I get emailed by people daily almost about going off their insulin, being able to reduce their insulin, being able to, of course, lose a lot of weight. But there are still some of you who you reach out to me and you do so as a third or fourth or fifth timer who has failed, but surprisingly, you're still motivated and you're still making some of the same mistakes that you have always made, and you're still entitled to think that that you shouldn't have to be hungry. So I wanted to talk today about getting past yourself, how to succeed when you've failed so many times. Now, you have to be very careful here, because once you have started a trend of failure, the trend becomes a new pattern. It is like a person who is a drug addict failing and talking about their drug addiction as they do in AA and NA becomes a perpetuation of the problem, because then their problem defines them and it becomes easier to want to seek out attention for the problem than it does to solve it. So for those of you who keep emailing me and you're basically preaching to me, some of you, about how you need to change, remember that's the first phase of the trap. The first phase of the trap is getting motivated to self-improve. Now the problem when you start finding self-improvement is that your brain is releasing little bits of dopamine that keep you going. That's why it feels so good to clean the house. It feels so good to get up and get out of the house and do something. It feels good to exercise because your brain rewards you for moving forward. And if you don't keep that going, then you start to run into problems. But that, if you're not careful, will perpetuate a cycle. Again, going to abuse, not drug abuse this time, but sexual abuse. I've worked with many people who started overeating because they were sexually abused or physically abused in some way. And what they found is later in life, they started either causing the same abuse they underwent or enduring it for pleasure. So it's not uncommon for someone who is sexually abused to set that as the norm. And then for the rest of their lives, they can't enjoy a sexual partner without some of the same abuse. Do you see how dangerous that is? And do you see how it applies right here? If you set up a pattern of failure where you're always starting a new diet or the same diet, and you are continuing to make the same mistakes and failing to be hungry, to go through the initiation of OMAD, to break in, then obviously starting the diet again is going to be like a habitual job hopper, someone who always feels the high of filling out the resume and sending it in and doing the whole, or a person who's always going to the doctor, Munchausen syndrome, always going to the doctor and pitching to the doctor how much of a problem they have and how they need help. It becomes a cycle of failure, but one that is rewarding because you feel your brain starts giving you feedback like you're doing a good job. Listen, you're not doing a good job if you have started OMAD 4 or 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 times and have failed. You are not confronting something that is the reason for your failure. Why have you failed? When I failed many diets in the past, and I've told everybody who's followed this channel knows my story. I've done a lot of different things, but the one thing that I was missing was the resolve to say, it's time to quit playing the game. It's time to win the game. And then when you're done with the game, you're done with the game. You're not going to play anymore because you've already won it. I just got out of a meeting with managers today one of the guys finally quit smoking, and he's been quit for a year now. We celebrated with him. Everybody in the room asked him, what made you finally quit? You tried all this Nicorette gum and all of this stuff that everybody says to try. What was it that did it this time? And he said, I realized I wasn't ever going to see my 3-month-old grow up. That's what the doctor told him. The doctor said, listen, damn it, if you don't stop smoking, you're going to die. That was enough. He finally got his life in order and said, it's time for me to quit playing games. That's where some of you are at. You need to know that playing the dieting game, like I've talked about since one of my first videos, is a dangerous process because it becomes a cycle and it is addictive in its own right. What you should do is do something and then get away from it. I know a guy, he's a scrawny little, miserable little piece of cheese, and he goes through life teaching people how to sell houses. Now you might think that's kind of cool, right? He probably earns a good living. Well, he does. The thing is, he's never sold a house. Not one time. But he found that he loved to hear himself talk, and he loved to be a teacher, basically. So he started to get onto the idea of selling something, and now he's one of these slimy little types that go out there and pitch what he's never done. That's the same thing that a lot of people do when they start fasting and they talk about self-improvement. They're not making any real improvement. For those of you who are not dropping your weight, most people are. Most people are, again, by far and away improving. I'm just kind of providing a guidepost, a little bit of a signage along the way for your own success. But for those of you who are not, you're just hopelessly in this cycle and you're just going around. You're spinning your wheels. Why do you want to do that? It's time you be real with yourself and you say, here's how much I have to lose. Here are my problems. Here's what I need to do. And here's how to move forward. Now, if you're running into medical problems, if you're a diabetic and you're running into blood sugar, face that issue. And don't go in blind and say, well, I'm just going to try it again. That's like getting lost and the proverbial guy not asking for directions. A guy and a gal are driving around in a car, and back before the days of GPS, the running joke was the girl would get out and ask the gas station attendant for directions. The guy will just keep driving around. Some of you are like the guy in the car. You're just going to drive around, and you're just going to say, I know I need to do it. Because you're getting that dopamine hit that says, yes, we need to clean, we need to straighten up, we need to exercise, we need to improve. Everybody from my generation remembers what it was like to watch a Rocky movie, especially the first Rocky, or any of the Rockies, and you get motivated to work out. You feel like you want to go and do something. Well, that only lasts so long. And then pretty soon you've got to recharge again. You've heard me say this from one of the first videos. You should not have to be recharging because you should have the motivation. It's the same thing I tell people. I've said this several times. When you find the right career or the right thing you're supposed to do, it's going to give you more energy than it takes from you. That's the same way it is in fasting. When are you, those of you who just keep meandering on, when are you going to take control and decide that it's time not to fail, that it's time not to fail anymore? When?